Welcome to the EnsoReal Paradigm Shifters podcast. This show is for and about the entrepreneurs who work to improve and expand our human well-being by bringing cutting-edge technologies and ideas to life. We are Marie and Magnus Dahlgren, your hosts. In this episode, we talk to Scott Livingston. Scott is the host of the Leave Your Mark podcast and designer of human performance solutions. And now, here's our conversation with Scott Livingston.
So let me introduce my co-host and my husband. His name is Magnus.
Hello.
Hi, Magnus. Scott.
Hello, Scott.
And we're happy to see you here today with us.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Scott, would you share with us and our listeners, please, what is your funniest talent? How do you think?
My funniest talent?
Mm-hmm.
My daughter would probably say my sense of humor, in the sense that I like to be playful with her and laugh a lot and joke around and make silly faces and silly sounds and use my voice to make different sounds with her. So that would be my silliest talent with my daughter. Probably saved only for her, really, and for my wife to see from time to time.
Nice. Okay, thank you for sharing. And how would you want to be introduced to our listeners today?
Well, I mean, it really comes down to sort of different spectrum of what I do. I'm a host of a podcast called Leave Your Mark, but I'm also really a human performance designer, backed by years as a strength and conditioning coach and athletic therapist by trade, but I've worked in lots of different human performance and athletic performance environments. So that's kind of what I do or did for professionally for most of my life. So I'm really into human performance design, creating solutions for human performance issues. So that's what I do.
And why did you decide to pursue this path, human performance, you said?
It was really by accident. I actually talk about that in my own podcast, that I originally wanted to be a radio disc jockey when I was a boy.
Really?
And my father convinced me that in Canada, in order to become a radio disc jockey, you can do a college, it's called a community college diploma. And my father scoffed at the idea that I wouldn't get a university degree. So he was like, you need to get a university degree. And the only thing I was really interested in was physical education. And so I took a program called exercise science and really discovered, in Canada, we call it athletic therapists, but the profession is really the people that run onto the field and fix people when they've broken their leg or sprained an ankle or what have you. So I got into that, and then I got into strength training because I'd always been into that as a football player. And so then I combined the two professions together, and that was sort of my career. And then I decided that I would try to investigate what it was like to be a broadcaster late in my life. So then I created the podcast, which was really my early interest in radio DJ, was what generated my interest in being in the podcast program.
This human performance, is it more athletic or is it mental as well, or combination of both?
It's kind of morphed over time. My career was built in sort of the athletic performance realm, working with mostly performance athletes, but then I got into building performance teams around these athletes, and so then got into helping the different professionals that work around an athlete, like mental performance professionals, nutrition, etc., all the different elements, help those athletes achieve. Then I got into organizational performance, building culture, creating environments where athletes and teams can be successful, and that transcends into business culture. I also built a couple of businesses myself, so it's kind of, has little tentacles that have expanded over time into different places.
And what do you enjoy the most in your work?
Really, I've discovered that there's two things that I like doing. One is really thoughtful conversation that helps people reflect on themselves. So, what they can do to live better lives, and I sort of try to act as a mirror to help them see what maybe they don't see. and mentorship. I really enjoy helping people achieve the goals or to achieve what it is that they want to achieve. So within the context of that, I do it with different entities, whether it's training somebody or mentoring somebody directly or teaching or what have you. So.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that you started your podcast, Leave Your Mark. Could you tell a little bit more about this podcast to us and our listeners too?
Sure. I started a podcast out of a program that you and I were actually in together. And the podcast called Leave Your Mark is really about taking a look at the guests' lives that I bring on the show, really what's influenced them, the experiences and the people that have influenced them in their careers and their lives to be the people that they are, and then how they're taking those experiences, who they are as a person, and then layering that into somebody else's life or creating environmental change or whatever it is that they're doing. So it's really about how are you influenced, and now how are you influencing others, and sort of how are you leaving a mark on this planet.
Is it important for you to leave your mark?
Yeah, in some sense. I mean, I don't think I live for the legacy, but I certainly hope that when my life is passed on this earth, that I've been able to help other people be the best that they can be, and perhaps left people with a feeling or a sense that they were touched by me, and that was helpful in their life.
Thank you. And we started to talk about legacy and contribution. Would you share with us, please, your most important values in your life? Because it's
very important for me is integrity, loyalty, honesty, trust, a sense of giving. I'm somebody who likes to give information or knowledge with really non-transactional. I mean, there's two sides to that equation. You can't give away all your intellectual property and not, have food to put on the table, etc. But for the most part, I'm somebody who tries to give as much as I can to people that I care about so that they can be better. Without it being very transactional. I believe in non-transactional friendship. I'm not really a big fan of people who go to parties in order to sort of make friends so that they can somehow scale the economy of life, so to speak. I'm more about human relationships and being good to one another. And maybe that's a cliche to some degree, but it's really who I am, and that's what's important to me. So.
It sounds for me that you know who you are, and you're pretty confident in who you are. And my question is, how did you discover yourself? Can you share this a little bit with our listeners? Is there any secret to this? How did it happen to you?
I don't know. I think there's a couple of different elements to it. One is just life experience. I've been divorced twice and married 3 times. And I think going through divorce challenges you to really look at who you are and why you got married and what was important to you. I think my parents were divorced early. I was challenged to probably be maybe a little bit more mature before my time when I was young, because I had to sort of be the man around the house. I've also always had sort of my father referred to me as the tortoise and my brother as the hare in our lives. So the turtle versus the rabbit. My brother was the guy who was always rushing to do things, and I was the guy who did things very slowly and methodically and thought about what I was doing. I've always been, for some reason, relatively introspective. I kind of think about, why am I doing things? And sometimes that over tortures me, and I overthink things a little bit. But so I've always thought about those things and really challenged who I was. And then more recently, I guess probably in the last 5 to 10 years, I've really taken a look at my mindset, why I do the things I do, what I live for and what I don't, and have really discovered over the last probably 10 years who I am. And it's funny because in my podcast, I use a little story that I tell. When I was in New York City after my second failed marriage, I was in a bookstore and I found a book called The Day You Were Born, and it was written by a woman named Linda Joyce, and it's she combined astrology and numerology together. And so I'm a Sagittarius 3, and I flip to the chapter on Sagittarius, and then you go through the different numerological levels of Sagittarius and all the different signs. And I went to the page on Sagittarius 3 and preview that. I used to have my favorite saying taped at the top of my desktop for probably 10 years before. It says, "Some men see things as they are and say why. I dream things that never were and say why not." So I had that taped to my desktop, and I opened up this book and I went to the chapter on Sag 3 and I read my purpose, which was very much, when I read it, very much resonated with who I was, what I was about the idea of inspiring people, challenging convention, creating change. And then the first line in what Linda did throughout it was she would always put a quote with each of these descriptors. And the first line in the descriptor was, "Some men see things as they are and say why. I dream things that never were and say why not." So I was kind of blown away that this saying that I had on my desktop is now in this book, and it's related to me. So actually in my podcast, I read everybody's purpose from their birth date, and then I talk about who they are. And I would say 8 times out of 10, the person's very moved by what I read. And actually, I was able to interview Linda probably 6 or 7 podcasts ago, which was really cool as well.
Oh, yeah, that's great. That's great.
For your introspection, do you have any methods or techniques that you favor as far as introspecting?
Well, I've really learned over the last 2 or 3 years to harness that through journaling. So every morning I get up, I sit down with my journal and I write in my journal. For a while I did it by computer, but I discovered probably more recently that the computer had become more of a distraction because emails would come in and all kinds of stuff that would take me away from thought. So I sit and I write what I'm saying to myself and the conversations I'm having, and recognize some of the things, and become more aware of some of the probably negative self-talk, and then some of the positive self-talk and the things that I believe in, and become more connected to that. So that would be one of the elements of my personal introspection. Another is I've always sat down at least once a year, if not now probably quarterly, and really looked at where am I going, what am I doing, and craft sort of a plan for myself. And I used to do that alone for many years. And then my wife and I, probably 4 years ago now, started doing it together. And that really allows me to sort of know that I'm on the path that I want to be on. And I worked with some people on through a program that I did on mindset that was very powerful and really taught me to create what they described as an avatar life statement for myself. So every so often I reflect on that and I recraft it, but it's I have 3 links to my body, mind, and soul, and sort of little statements that I reconnect with every day, and I rewrite it every day so that I'm always connected to who I want to be. And I guess the biggest piece that comes out of that I've learned only in the last few years to do is, rather than having a list of things to do, what I have is my avatar statements, and then what I'm doing during the day, I set my intentions, and I make sure that for each of those 3 areas, body, mind, and soul, I'm doing at least 1, if not 2 or 3 things in each of those categories on a daily basis for those elements of who I am. So it's not a to-do list like I got to go shopping and I got to, buy this and fix that and go to the bank. It's more about, for my body as an example, I have my workout of the day, what I'm going to do that day, and the fact that I got to stretch, and then I got to do, because there's some things that I want to connect to. So that keeps me connected to who I am and always moving forward and putting the predominant majority of my effort into the things that are making me grow and be the person that I am.
All right, thank you.
Would it be accurate to say that the result who you are currently now is the result of your decisions in the past? Is it correct?
Oh, absolutely, sure. I think everybody's a result of the environmental and sociological and physical experiences they go through. I think the thing that I've learned probably in the last 3 or 4 years with the mindset work that I've done is that I think sometimes we think that those things are hard stops, like we experienced X, so that means we are now Y. And instead, we are the ones who decide how we are affected by those things. So whereas my parents divorced when I was young, and maybe that created something in me, and I got divorced and that created something in me, I have to recraft what that really means. And for a while, I think when I was younger, I thought that those things were me, you know, and I think you can recraft you anytime you want to in your life.
Thank you. Thank you. And could you share with us what keeps you going? Because there are in everybody's life times and days when you feel maybe low, a little bit blue. So what keeps you going? What motivates you to wake up in the morning and to live your purpose?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a false reality that we're all going to get to some kind of euphoric happiness space where we're always going to be happy. And I think to some degree, the reason we don't have that is so that we can actually value when we are happy and understand when we are sad and what we're going through. I think having greater clarity on why you are in both spectrums and both spaces is really important. So being more aware of yourself and what you're going through and your personal language and stuff. So the journaling is very powerful for that.
Yeah.
And the other piece for me is at the end of the day, I always count my wins, which is a very positive driver for my next day. So we tend to be overly negative in our personal self-talk. It's a normality of human nature for some reason. And maybe it's born of a physiological need to prevent injury or to be safe in our environments from many years ago. But at the end of the day, that is something that we do too much of. So what I've learned to do is at the end of my day, going back to my avatar intentions, I sort of finish the day and I reflect back and what was it that I accomplished connecting to me and the spirit of my intention for that day. And I sort of celebrate the fact that I've done those things. And so then that puts me on a positive so I can sleep better. And I think we're learning more and more that sleep is probably the most important recovery piece in our lives. So if we're not sleeping well, then we're more than likely going to wake up and not feel happy and then be grumpy and not be happy about where the day is starting. So it's really about having these characteristic processes that we go through that really sort of push you off of that negative self-talk.
And could I ask you to share a little bit more about avatar life and avatar system, or how you call it, where we can find maybe more information about this and overall what is this all about?
Well, I did some work with a couple. Their names are Brian Grasso and Carrie Campbell in Canada, who do a lot of stuff around mindset. And you can find them if you Google Brian and Carrie at Brian and Carrie Live or Brian Carrie, punch it in and you'll probably find it on the internet. But I think it's not an uncommon, I think they've adopted some practices from other mindset expertise, et cetera. But the central concept is that we have a tendency to set a lot of goals in our lives, and they actually talk about a concept called object referral versus self-referral. The typical goal-setting situation is that you set a very finite goal or a definitive goal that you want to achieve. I want to lose 20 pounds. I want to get that job. I want to buy that car. I want to get that house, etc. Whatever those things are. Yeah. And maybe you even set a timeline for yourself to do it. And maybe you even set some structure for it. But what happens is that you become very focused on the goal and not on the process that you're going through to get there, and not on how it's connecting with you as a person. So the first thing you want to do is try to discover, at least in some sense, who you are. So what makes you feel good? What are the things that you resonate with, that you connect with? And then from that, who is the person that you want to be? Who do you want to express as yourself? And sometimes that's a difficult thing for people to do, because they often put a wall between who they would like to be, and that wall is how they're going to be that. And they're always looking at the how. So you try to take the how wall down and sort of just connect with who you'd like to be. And then describe that for yourself. You can use body, mind, and soul. You can use family, finance, and forget what the other one is, relationships, if you want, as descriptors for yourself. But try then to say, okay, based on, if I use body, mind, and soul, what is the body I want to have that will express for me health, well-being, goodness, etc. For some person, it might mean that they've got great abs and they look great. Somebody else might just feel, well, I want to be fluid and flexible. Somebody else might just say, I want to feel good in my skin. I want to look good when I open up the mirror in the morning. Whatever it is that you sort of describe. Mind, how do you want your mind to express itself? What do you want to be expressing professionally? And then soul is, the feelings that you have connecting to others, what are the richnesses that come into you? Is it family? Is it friends? What are those things that create soulful experiences you? So you sort of look at those three things and then craft. This is very Cole's Notes version of this whole thing, but because it takes some work to get there. But ultimately, you look at those three things and then say to yourself, what's a sort of a functional statement for yourself that's going to help you connect with that element? So for me, I'll share mine because I'm not afraid to share them. My current avatar statement is Scotty 6.0, I see me. So 6.0 is, I'm going to turn 55 this year. So 6.0 is 60. So in the next 5 years, who do I want to be? Who do I want to express over these? How do I want to grow as I grow towards 60? And I want to see myself more and more. So that's my sort of avatar statement. That's what I'm working towards. Then my three sort of statements are Music Man, because I've always loved the concept of DJ and connectivity. And my words towards Music Man are free spirit, deep conversations, inspired contribution. Then my body is magnetic. I want to feel magnetic. So I want to be lean, confident, and in flow. I want to be flexible. I want to be lean. I want to be confident about who I am. And my mind is more about business and life, but it's thriving in business, life, and mentorship, because those are the things that I want. So every day I write this down as part of my journal. So I connect to who do I want to be? And then under each one of those intentions, so my soul, Music Man, what are the 2-3 things today that I want to do? So as an example, one of my soulful things to do today was to talk to you guys.
Wow.
So that's it's a podcast. I get to chat with some people I don't know well about who I am and what they want to know. And that's a deeper conversation, and I enjoy that. So that feeds my soul. My magnetic, one of the things I wanted to do today was a good strength workout. So I went to the gym. I did my stretching. I'm eating well. And my thriving, I have some business things I have to accomplish today. Some of them I will, and some of them I won't accomplish. But at the end of the day, I'll take stock of those things. Did I accomplish those things? So now I've moved one step further incrementally to Scotty 6.0, and I keep growing.
That's great.
And so everybody has to craft a different picture for themselves. Does that make sense?
Yes. And you said you're doing this on daily basis. I just would like to repeat this, because I think it's very important to do this on daily basis. And maybe you can share with our listeners and with us why it's so important. What do you achieve through repeating this kind of action daily?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think if I've learned anything throughout my life, and very much so in the last 5 or 6 years, but through business, through personal successes in the areas, and through the training that I've done with the athletes that I've worked with, the number one centerpiece to any kind of successful growth and development or success-oriented reality is consistency. Doesn't matter what you do, if you don't do it consistently, you're not going to get where you want to get to. So you want to lose weight, you have to be consistent about what you're doing. You want to achieve a business goal, you have to be consistent about what you're doing. And it's most of the time when people don't achieve the things they want to achieve or get where they want to get to, it's because they've done it for a little while, then they've kind of ebbed off and then they lose motivation.
Yeah.
So having this point of connection for me, allows me to be more deeply connected to what I'm doing. So it's not a to-do list. It's a list of things that I want to accomplish based on a lot of deep thinking, a lot of connection to me. So then I can really ask myself, do I really want to do these things? And if I don't, well then, you know, but that consistency is probably the most important thing. I saw a really good Goalcast video on Facebook the other day from a gentleman, I forget the guy's name, but he talks about the Japanese bamboo plant. Have you ever seen that one?
No, I haven't.
Apparently there's a Japanese bamboo plant that you plant the seeds for it, and it takes 5 years of nursing it with daily watering, making sure the soil is good, the sun, all the different things. 5 years, nothing grows for 5 years.
Wow.
And then after 5 years, the bamboo shoots grow 90 feet in 5 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
So the whole point of the story and the point of it is 5 years, you got to nurse it. You got to watch it. Nothing's happening. Nothing's happening. But all of a sudden, boom, you have this amazing result. And it's like that in life. You know, there's a lot of things that we have to just keep saying, yeah, if I put my energy in, eventually I will get where I want to get to. And most of the time, our problem is we give up too quickly. And unfortunately, in today's society, with everything being so immediate, and our sensitivity to the immediacy being even more and more heightened, it's easier and easier for us to give up on things. You know?
Yeah.
We can watch whatever TV show we want whenever we want to. I mean, when I grew up, I didn't get to watch cartoons until Saturday. Now my daughter can watch cartoons anytime she wants to. You know, it doesn't really matter to the kids today. They don't even have to watch commercials anymore like we did. So.
Can you give us an example of something that took 5 or so years that nothing happened, and then all of a sudden
it grew? Yeah. Well, I think it's very that kind of example is I would say not completely relative to any circumstance that I could really choose, but I can talk about my business as an example. Like the business I have, which is a performance facility, started out of just an idea that my wife and I had 15 years ago. We had really 2 sticks to rub together, and we sort of found a place that gave us some free rental space. And we had hoped to work with some high performing athletes, and I was working for a professional hockey team, and we found this little space and put out a therapy table, and we had a vision of what we were going to do. And we slowly just worked it. And 15 years later, we have 35 people that work for us. We've trained probably 20 Olympians, 10 of whom have won Olympic medals. We've trained all kinds of professional athletes. We train wonderful human beings who like to achieve all kinds of great things in their own lives. And and our business generates over $1 million gross a year, so it's not a bamboo tree example, but it's certainly an example of, staying the course and working things. Eventually your vision comes to fruition, for sure.
Okay.
That's
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you. Very inspiring. And do you work with the addictive behaviors? Because people tend to have a certain habits in their lives, and some of these habits are addictive. Mm-hmm. Do you deal with such behaviors or no?
Well, it's interesting. It's a fine line, right? Between, I think most of us look at addictive behaviors as the things that we've labeled as negative, but there's lots of positive addictive behaviors in the sense that, when I say positive, they're sociologically labeled as positive because we perceive them to be as like exercise. Yeah. So, you'll have people who do triathlons, and really what they've done is they've traded a lot of people who do triathlons or really ultra endurance racing. And this is a generalization for people who are listening, so don't get upset at me because you're an ultra endurance athlete and you're not like this. But my career, I've met a lot of these people, and most of the time they have some level of demon that they're managing in the back. and at some point possibly got into alcohol, drugs, weight loss, obesity, etc. And they fought those things, and they traded one addiction for another one, which is exercise and training and training and training and training. So the question then becomes, is this one over here better than this one over here? And I think to some degree, it is probably better physiologically. You're probably going to have a greater health level, but I think you still haven't really dealt with why you're doing what you're doing. And so in answer to your question, my specialization is not to work with addictive behavior, but I certainly work with people who invest in things in an addictive way. And I think that's also a very big fine line too. Have this conversation with a lot of performance people that I talk to, and anybody who really has extreme success, call it greatness in a sport or in business or in life, probably has something broken in the background. Because in order to be so singly minded and singly focused at something, you have to let a lot of other things go. And that sometimes requires that you're fighting something, dealing with something. There's something burning inside you, that you're sort of using the medication of sport or the medication of business or what have you to handle. Mm-hmm. And that's why, a lot of athletes struggle post-sport career because they can no longer use that as their medication, and then they're challenged by who they are and what they believe in. And so yeah, the answer to your question is I deal with them, but it's not my forte. I let the psychologists work with those guys.
Okay, thank you. And would you share with us, please, what is your biggest challenge currently in your business? Because we all have challenges.
Yeah, I would say just technology. It's both real big positive and a negative, in the sense that I'm almost 55 and I didn't grow up with technology as something that was really mainstay of my life. I mean, I really grew through the technological age. When I was a teenager, we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have we just had phones with cords. We had TVs. You had to go over and change the channel. So all that stuff in my middle lifetime, when I started university, when I finished university in '87, I was still writing papers with typewriter and taking white out and whiting out the mistakes that I'd made. So it was only during that '90s phase where we started to get computers and everything else. So I've watched all of that and sort of at times not even invested in it. And then in the last few years, because of business and the things I wanted to do, tried to invest in it more, and like building a podcast and everything. So stuff that is relatively intuitive to millennials is not intuitive to me. So that's probably my biggest challenge.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
And
I can relate.
Yeah.
I have another question. How it actually feels like to be you?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I've been asked that one before. It's funny reflecting on that, and I have actually not reflected on the answer to that question, but I have a sort of an answer connected to it, and that is, I still think of myself as a 21-year-old to some degree, and I have a hard time recognizing who I am in the sense that what others think of me. And I don't want to say this, it's going to come across maybe in an egocentric manner, but I've done a lot of things in my life. I've worked with some of the best athletes in Canada. I've worked for the Montreal Canadiens, which is like working, for, where are you guys from again?
Maryland.
We're in Maryland.
Maryland. So
close to Washington, D.C.
Okay. So it's, you've heard of the Montreal Canadiens then, so you know what they are, and they're like the New York Yankees of hockey. So, I've worked in these environments, and a lot of people think of me who are younger, or they look at me as inspiring, but I don't. I'm like, well, I don't see that, and it's kind of a weird dichotomy for me. Like, I'm just me, I'm just a 21-year-old guy who still gets scared of doing X, Y, Z, but there's people who are like, well, he did that, you worked with him, her. So so what does it feel like to be me? Not quite as impressive as people might think it feels to be me. If that makes any sense.
Thank you for your answer. And could you share with us, please, your plans for the next, let us say, 5-10 years in business? And maybe you would want to share some personal goals too, if you have such.
Yeah, well, I sort of shared my avatar earlier. I'm trying to really just define who I am more and more and live closer to that. So, making choices, whether it is in business projects that I do, or if there's a job that I'm interested in or a project that I'm interested in, why do I want to do it and how does it connect to who I am? I would say when I was younger, my perception was sort of going back to that object versus self-referred concept. I wanted to get the cool job, and I worked for the Montreal Canadiens, and it didn't really make me feel the way I thought it was going to make me feel, and wanted to work with some great athletes, and those were amazing experiences. But now for me, it has to connect to that avatar center point. So am I mentoring somebody? Am I helping other people grow? Am I having deep and strong conversations? Am I taking care of myself physically? So, then I go through that sort of litmus test before I make decisions to do things. So that's who I want to live more as. And from a business perspective, I think what I'm trying to craft for myself is opportunities to live my avatar. So whether it's podcasting and generating a business backbone to that, where I get to mentor or share or be active and physical and stuff. So it's really trying to craft my life and earn income through things that really resonate with who I am.
Thank you. And will you share with us what keeps you awake at night?
All the things that get in the way of doing exactly what I just talked about, which is, regular life experiences, paying the bills, making sure that, ends meet, and your daughter is safe. And I have one little girl, and make sure that she's living the life that I'd like for her to be able to live. And but I would say I'm less kept up now than I used to be. I think when I was younger, I would have more sleepless or difficult nights of sleep. Now it's probably if I drink too much Cabernet, I get kept up.
Yes, by the way, I asked you previously and you said that you like wine. Could you share about this part of your passion, I would say?
Yeah, I didn't, it's funny, when I was younger, up until I was about mid-30s, I didn't drink coffee. I didn't drink wine. I was, if I drank alcohol, like everybody's college experience, I had my share of drinks, but I would drink mostly, whether it was vodka and orange juice or the odd beer here and there. But I guess when I got in the National Hockey League, I got introduced to good wine because the guys there had money, spend money on wine. And I started to have more disposable income, so I would spend some money on good wine. And so I would say probably from about 35 until 45, I used to love drinking big, bold wines like Cabs. And I became fond of a lot of West Coast wine in the States. I've never been really an aficionado of French wine. Some Italian that I like. I like a lot of the Super Tuscans and stuff like that. But I got to know a fair number of the wines of the West Coast. And then when I was 45, I started noticing that I would drink, and at night I would be woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning with my heart pounding and my head blowing up, and I was just not happy. And I was like, what is going on? So that's when I discovered Pinot Noir, which is a less tannic grape, and got rid of the tannins. And so now, for the most part, I only drink Pinots, and I like a lot of the Oregon and Washington Pinots, and that's what I drink now when I drink red wine. And I like having a glass of red wine with a steak is, I guess, my go-to, so to speak.
So what makes a wine good for you?
It used to be just the bold boom feeling, the smell and the panache of the taste. But I think now I've learned to really like the nose of the wine, the aroma of it, and then what it's sort of how it affects my palate. And it's certainly not, I would say, the alcoholic side of it. I'm not addicted to or connected so much with getting drunk as much as I just enjoy the flavor. And there's something, I think, oral about just drinking your wine and being relaxed and sort of connecting with music. And it's my relaxed time, my sort of Scotty time, so to speak.
Cool.
All right.
Sounds very relaxing indeed.
Sounds nice.
Yeah.
We should start drinking.
Good
Should
wine.
do the podcast with a glass of wine and some music.
Okay. And would you share with us, please, the story of your life when you experienced the biggest aha moment of realization of some kind?
Well, I think when you asked me that question in the preparatory part of the thing, I would try to reflect back, but I would say after my second divorce, I kind of had this recognition that, of my part in the failure of the relationship. And I've come to realize that I don't really like the word failure much, as I think true failure is when you don't achieve something, but you don't learn from it. Mm-hmm. So I think after the failure of my first marriage, I didn't really learn about myself much coming out of that. And I made the same sort of mistake the second time around. And the mistake was not to be who I was, but to reconfigure who I was to satisfy the needs of another person. So I think that was a big aha moment for me, was to discover that I needed to be more connected to who I was and who I am, and to find a partner that brought that out of me or helped me find that, versus me changing to be with them.
Okay, thank you very much. Could you please share with us we were talking about this pretty much a lot today, but I would like to ask this once again, being a coach. What is the purpose of your life?
My purpose is to inspire people through challenging convention, creating change, and demonstrating through my own acts what I believe in. So that's kind of my purpose statement, and I do that through the things that I do professionally and personally. And so, I've kind of discovered that as my purpose statement, and so that's what I live by now. And it's really I'm a convention challenging person. I don't really like being in jobs where everybody's doing the same thing every day and don't really think about how they can do it better or improve. And so I'm always challenging that, and not in a, when I was younger, it was probably more rebellious in the way I did it. Now I've kind of seasoned to myself in the way I express it, but it's really, looking at, can we do something better? Can we do it in a different way that's going to achieve something differently? And I like making people look at the lens of situations from a different perspective.
And what it gives to you when you see that people see the situation of themselves or their lives from a different perspective, what kind of maybe feeling, or so to speak, your feeling?
It's internally rewarding for me anyways, because I think it's innate to who I am. So I'm feeding my soul by expressing myself and helping somebody else see something they don't see. And when that light bulb happens for them, it's feeding an internal need in me that I think is innate to who I am. And that's one of the things I think that the book that I talked about earlier made me realize is, whether you believe in astrology or not, or whether you believe in spirituality or all these different things, I do think that we all have sort of an essence of who we are, and we're on this earth ready to discover what that is. And we all have a different essence and a different spiritual internal character. And I think as we peel the layers back of ourselves, we discover what that truly is, and that's the true purpose. And it was interesting about the book is the purpose statements in the book aren't sort of what people would sort of characteristically call a purpose statement. It's not kind of like, I'm here to, achieve X or to get Y or do whatever. It's more about how you connect with who you are and discovering who you are. And so your purpose is to discover yourself. So that's kind of, I think, what I find helps when I do things. I think I discover more and more of myself when I'm able to do those things. Yeah.
And if I would ask you who you really are, who are you, what would be your answer now? Please.
You have to sing that like the Who. Who are you? Who am I? I'm a father, a son, a husband, and a friend, and I care to try to help people be the best that they can be, along with, while I do that, being the best that I can be. So that's who I am, I think.
Thank you.
Have you discovered roles that you thought you were, but you're not?
Interesting. Yeah, I think, my ego at times probably wanted me to be, wanted to be the label of what I expected was important. He is this or he does that, and I think that that's an early and sometimes lifetime reality for people, is that they're connected to what they are, not who they are. So when, somebody says to you, who are you, or what, your expression of who you are, it's, well, I do this and I work for so-and-so and I achieve this, da, 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 da. And I think that's commonplace for most of us. And I've realized that that's really not who I am. The letters behind my name, or the education that I have, or the material goods that I have is not who I am. The car that I drive is not who I am. The house that I have is not who I am. Who I am is how I make people feel, So at the end of the day, oh my God, what is her name leaving my brain? But I forget the name of the woman, but she said, people may not remember what you did for them or what you gave them or what you said to them, but they're going to remember how you made them feel. So, that's probably the most important thing in life, is how do you make other people feel?
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Thank you. What would be your advice to your adult son? How do you think? Because I hope there will be enough young people listening to our podcast and to this episode. And I believe that at least that's part of my purpose in life, to share my experience with younger generation, because we will leave this place, so to speak, and they will be here. And what would be your advice?
Well, my simplest advice, which I have given on my show through conversations with some of the people that I've talked to, but to younger people, is to not be in such a rush to be responsible. I think that we're sort of domesticated. I don't know if you've ever read the book, The Four Agreements, but it's a really impressive book that really talks about 4 life sort of hallmarks that we should sort of stick to. 1 is be impeccable with your word. 2 is don't assume anything. 3 is don't take anything personally. And the last one is always do your best. But the center of that is really that I think he talks about the concept of human domestication and how we sort of set all these rules for our kids, and we're set in this kind of domestic experience that we have to behave in a certain way and be a certain thing. And one of those things is we have to get an education, then we have to get a university degree, and then we have to get a job, and we have to be responsible, and we have to pay all our bills. And certainly we should be paying our bills, and we shouldn't make other people pay them. Yeah. But I think sometimes we're in too much of a rush when we come out of high school and go into university and stuff to somehow find that job and then be responsible and then get married and then have kids. And then all of a sudden when we're in our 40s or whatever age, the classic, midlife experience or midlife breakdown is I think people have this sort of revelation. My cat's going berserk, sorry. And they have this midlife revelation that they are not really living who they are because they've sort of put all these objectives in front of them, these object-related sort of connections, and they haven't really connected with who they are. And so I think the earlier that you can spend some time just connecting with who you are and not layering all this responsibility into your life, the more powerful your life's going to be. And the choices that you're going to make to get married or to have a home or to settle down somewhere are going to be more connected to who you are instead of what you were supposed to achieve or get or have. Easier said than done sometimes, but I think that would be my advice.
Thank you very much. And I have a few more questions, and one of them is, could you please recall and share with us the moment when you decide that I want to live pretty relaxed, I want to really enjoy life, and I really, really want to feel deeply what I do, what I experience, what is in my life, because at least that's that's the impression I got from what you told us, that you like really to feel deeply and to enjoy what is going on in your life, people, conversations, wine, your work.
You want to know when I realized that? Is that what you're
asking?
When
you realized and when you decided that I want this to be this way. Because like you say, a lot of people, most all of them, they're in constant rush. And it's like rush for the sake of rushing. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times it's much ado without nothing. So
I really have discovered it in the last couple of years. I don't think I was, if you'd talked to me 10 years ago, you wouldn't have had the same conversation. I don't think you would have had a conversation that was much more about structure. And I would call it structure and function, what you've got to do, why you're doing it, what I'm trying to achieve, where I'm going. And it would have sounded very thoughtful and very, constructed and oriented towards some success goals, but it wouldn't have been as, I would say, as cerebral or as soulful. And so I would say probably in the last year or two, through some of the mindset work I've done, through a lot of self-connection and just kind of understanding. And I'm still going through that. I'm going to be going through that for the rest of my life. I think that's the experience that I think if you are, call it ascending in life, you're going through this process constantly, and you're sort of connecting to the deeper spirit of who you are and why you do things. And the more you connect with that, the more you do things that are really connected to that. I think the mistake that we make is that we see what people, and that's the tough thing about the internet today, is that we'll bounce into people who are soulful and connected to who they are and what they're doing. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, that's what I'm supposed to be doing. No, what I'm doing and what somebody else is doing is what's good for me. I know what resonates inside my soul, and I'm learning more and more what that is. That may not be for you two guys. You might have two completely different resonation points. It's for you to discover that and craft a life that allows you to do that. That might not mean drinking wine and listening to music. It might mean reading books, or it might mean going for long walks. It might mean, parachuting. Who knows what it is, but like everybody needs to find that resonation point where they feel like they're connected to the spirit of who they are. And we have to stop looking at what everybody else is doing, which is a hard thing to do nowadays with all the social media and everything else. We can look to other people, I think, for examples of how people have found that and what they've worked towards to connect to that, and sort of use those experiences as opportunities for ourselves to challenge ourselves. But I don't think that there's any cookie cutter truth that we all should be living with, So that's kind of who.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And is there anything we didn't ask you about, but you would like to share today with us?
No, I think it was lots of great questions. You've got a wonderful podcast. I hope people come and listen to mine when they have a chance. Leave Your Mark, it's called. I'm happy if I have more listeners and can connect to my little world and inspiration of what I'm trying to bring to the world. And I'm sure you're doing the same thing. So,
okay,
nice
thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yes,
Well,
thank you
thanks,
for a
Scott.
great
Appreciate it.
interview.
Have a good day.
Yes, you too. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.